The desert sky was painted in red and gold. As the two suns slowly sank behind the broken mountains, the wasteland stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with sand, jagged rocks, and bones of forgotten battles. And in the middle of this endless land walked the Huntress. She was tall, her skin marked with glowing lines that pulsed like fire beneath her flesh. Her eyes, sharp and bright, scanned the horizon as if searching for the next prey. The long spear she carried was not just a weapon, it was a symbol. 1,000 warriors had fallen before it, and none had ever survived her challenge. Her people called her invincible, her enemies called her death, and she believed both names were true. Legends of the Huntress spread across villages and camps. Mothers used her name to frighten children. Soldiers whispered her victories in fear. No one had ever seen her defeated. Some said she had the blessing of her gods. Others said her spear drank the blood of her victims and grew stronger after each kill. Whatever the truth was, one fact remained clear: she had never lost. That evening, the Huntress followed a trail of smoke. Her sharp senses caught the scent of burning wood. Someone had lit a fire in the wasteland. That was unusual. Few dared to wander here, and fewer still survived. The Huntress tightened her grip on the spear and moved closer. Her footsteps were silent, but her presence was heavy. The sand seemed to bow under her weight. The wind carried whispers of old battles, as if the land itself remembered her victories. She walked with purpose, certain that another fight awaited her. Soon she saw him, a figure by the fire, a man unlike the others she had hunted. He was not from her world. His skin was pale under the dying light, his hair dark, his stance calm. And in his hand was a blade long, sharp, and gleaming with a strange silver light. The Huntress stopped, her eyes narrowed. A human. She had heard stories of them, strangers from the stars, weaker than her kind, fragile, and easily broken. Yet this one sat with his back straight, his blade resting on his knees, waiting as if he already knew she was there. The Huntress stepped forward, the sand crunching under her boots. Her voice was low, almost like a growl. "You sit in my land. Stranger, do you not fear death?" The man looked up. His eyes met hers without flinching. He did not bow his head. He did not tremble. Instead, he spoke in a calm tone. "Death waits for all, but not tonight." The Huntress tilted her head, intrigued. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Her enemies usually screamed, begged, or tried to run. This one did neither. He sat like a warrior who had nothing to prove. She raised her spear, the tip glowing faintly as it hummed with ancient energy. "Then rise, stranger. Face me. Prove your words with blood." The man slowly stood. His movements were steady, controlled. He lifted his blade and pointed it toward her. For a moment, the firelight reflected on the weapon, and the Huntress saw something strange. This was no ordinary metal. It carried weight, power, and history. Their eyes locked. The wasteland fell. Silent, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Two warriors stood ready, one known as unbeatable, the other unknown but fearless. The Huntress struck first. Her spear sliced through the air, sharp and fast. The man moved, his blade flashing. Steel met energy. The clash rang out across the desert. Sparks burst into the twilight. For the first time in her life, the Huntress felt resistance. Her spear had never been stopped. Never. And yet here stood a human whose blade held against her strike. Her lips curled into a smile, a rare expression that showed not mockery, but excitement. "Interesting," she whispered. The man pushed back, forcing her a step away. He did not attack wildly. He did not rush. He held his ground like a wall of stone. The Huntress spun her spear, testing him, strike after strike, fast as lightning. Her weapon whistled through the air, but each time his blade moved to meet it, blocking, deflecting, never breaking. The desert echoed with the sound of their battle. Fire crackled behind them. Sand rose in swirling clouds. The sky darkened as night crept in. The stars began to watch, as if even they were curious. Minutes passed, but neither warrior fell. The Huntress grew more eager with each clash. Her blood burned, Her heart pounded. For the first time, she was not fighting to kill. She was fighting to learn. Finally, the two weapons locked together, spear against blade, their faces only inches apart. Her glowing eyes stared into his steady ones, and in that silent moment, she realized something. This fight would not end tonight. With a sudden twist, she pulled back, stepping into the shadows. Her voice echoed in the desert air. "You are not like the others, human. I will find you again." The man lowered his blade, breathing steady. His answer was simple: "I'll be waiting." And so the Huntress, unbeaten by any before, walked into the darkness, carrying with her a new thought that shook her very soul. For the first time in her endless victories, she had not won. The wasteland was quiet again, but the silence carried weight. The Huntress had walked away, yet her mind burned with the memory of the human's blade. She had fought 1,000 battles, each ending with her victory, but this one had ended differently. For the first time, her spear had been matched. She could not sleep. That night, she sat on a high cliff, her spear resting beside her, and she stared at the stars. The human's calm face haunted her. His voice echoed in her head. "I'll be waiting." It was not a threat. It was a promise, and promises in her world were meant to be tested. By dawn, she moved again. Her instincts guided her. Her prey was not running, he was waiting. And that was what made it exciting. The Huntress lived for the chase, for the clash, for the storm of battle, and this time, she was hunting not for a kill, but for an answer. She found him by the river that cut through the desert. The human was sharpening his blade on a stone. His reflection rippled in the water, calm and unbroken. He did not turn when she arrived. He simply spoke. "You came quickly." The Huntress stepped forward, her spear gleaming under the morning light. Her lips curled into a half-smile. "Did you think I would let you rest?" He finally turned, raising his weapon. His eyes locked onto hers, steady and fearless. The fire between them sparked again, stronger than before. And then it began. The Huntress lunged, her spear cutting through the air with deadly precision. The human's blade rose to meet it. Their strikes rang like thunder, each blow echoing across the riverbanks. Sand and water burst with every impact. The ground shook beneath their feet. The fight was faster this time, harder, her attacks sharper, his defenses stronger. Every movement was a test, a question, and every block was an answer. The human was not only surviving, he was learning. The Huntress spun, striking low high, then twisting mid-strike. The man blocked, countered, and stepped closer. His blade was not just steel, it was rhythm, patience, and control. Her heart raced. She had never felt this before. Every clash filled her with fire. Every spark from their weapons felt alive. And as the fight went on, she realized something dangerous. She was smiling. Hours seemed to pass, yet neither fell. Sweat dripped down the human's face. Glowing dust clung to the Huntress's skin. Still, they pressed on, their will refusing to break. Finally, their weapons locked again, spear against blade, pushing with all their strength. Their eyes met, wild and burning. Her voice came out like a growl. "Why do you fight me, human? What do you seek?" He pushed back, his voice rough but steady. "I fight because you need it." The words stunned her. For a heartbeat, her grip faltered. She had always believed she fought to prove herself, to be the strongest, to never lose. But now, hearing him, doubt slipped into her mind. The human broke the lock, his blade slicing close enough to cut a strand of her hair. She pulled back with a hiss, her blood roaring. The fight had not ended, but something inside her had cracked. The Huntress lowered her spear for a moment, her chest rising and falling. She stared at him, and for the first time, she did not see prey. She saw a mirror, a rival, maybe even something more. The human lowered his blade too, his voice calm once again. "You are not my enemy, but you are not my friend, not yet." The silence that followed was heavier than battle. The river whispered between them. The stars above seemed to lean closer. The Huntress finally turned away, but her words were sharp. "This is not finished, human. I will face you again until I know who truly stands above." The man nodded, his grip tight on his blade. "And I will be here." She vanished into the wasteland once more, her mind a storm. Her heart had always known victory, but now it knew something else, uncertainty, and that uncertainty was more dangerous than any defeat. The Huntress moved like a shadow through the wasteland, but her thoughts were louder than the storms that swept the sands. She had never felt this way before. Every battle in her past had been simple: strike, kill, walk away. Yet after facing the human twice, her steps no longer felt steady. She told herself it was just another hunt, another test. But deep inside, she knew the truth. Something about him disturbed her. His blade was not just strong, it was unyielding, and worse, his eyes, calm and sharp, looked at her not with fear but with understanding. Days turned into nights, and nights turned into restless mornings. She hunted other prey in the meantime: raiders, beasts, mercenaries. But each kill felt empty. Their screams did not echo the same way. Their resistance was weak, predictable. Lifeless, she missed the clash of steel that had awakened her blood. The Huntress found herself returning again and again to the river where they had fought. She followed tracks, broken stones, burnt wood from his fires. Each sign made her heartbeat quicken, but never once did she catch him unaware. He always knew she was near. He always waited. Their battles became a rhythm, each time fiercer, each time longer, sometimes under burning suns, sometimes under the cold stare of the stars. They struck and blocked, pushed and pulled, neither gaining victory, neither falling in defeat. But with each clash, something began to change. The Huntress noticed it first when her spear cracked at the edge, a thin fracture that spread like a scar across the weapon she had carried since her first kill. The spear had always been perfect, unbreakable, yet now it bore a wound. The same way she did. That night, she stared at the crack for hours. Her hands trembled, though she refused to admit it. Her people would say the weapon reflected its master. And if that was true, then she was breaking too when they met again. The fight was different. Her strikes carried not just fury, but desperation. Her movements were wild, less controlled. She wanted to prove that she was still herself, still unbeaten, still the Huntress the world feared. But the human saw through her. His blade moved with patience, cutting through her storm. His eyes were calm, almost pitying, and that pity burned her worse than any wound. "You are not fighting me," he said between clashes, his voice steady even as steel sang against spear. "You are fighting yourself." Her roar shook the desert. She lunged, forcing him back with a strike so powerful it split the ground. Sand burst upward like fire, but when the dust cleared, he was still standing, blade steady. Her chest heaved, her muscles ached. For the first time in years, she felt her strength falter. The human did not attack her weakness, he simply waited. His silence was louder than any battle cry. The Huntress lowered her spear slightly, sweat dripping from her brow. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Why do you not kill me, human? Is that not why you fight?" He shook his head slowly, his eyes steady. "I do not fight to kill. I fight to remind you that you are more than your victories." The words cut deeper than any blade. Her hands shook. Her spear felt heavier than ever before. She turned her head away, unable to meet his gaze. For the first time since her youth, the Huntress felt fear. Not fear of death, but fear of losing herself. Fear that without her victories, she was nothing. Fear that this human, this outsider, had seen something inside her that even she had denied. The desert wind howled as if mocking her silence. She tightened her grip on the spear, forcing her body to stand tall. But deep within, she knew something had shifted. A wall had cracked. A certainty had broken. The Huntress vanished into the darkness once again, leaving the human by the river. But this time, she did not walk away with pride. She walked away with questions she could not escape. And in the heart of the wasteland, the unbeaten Huntress felt the first weight of defeat, not on the battlefield, but within her soul. The Huntress wandered the wasteland with heavy steps. Her spear still carried the crack from the last fight, and each time she touched it, the fracture seemed to whisper to her, reminding her of the human's words. She hated those words, hated how they clung to her mind like thorns, yet no matter how far she walked, she could not escape them. Every battle she fought after that felt hollow. Raiders fell before her spear. Beasts screamed as they died, but none of them stirred her blood the way the human did. None of them forced her to question who she was. None of them stood unbroken, and so, again and again, she returned to him. Sometimes she found him under the burning suns, sitting quietly with his blade across his knees, sometimes by the river, sometimes among the broken ruins where fire still glowed. He never hid from her, never ran. He was always waiting, as if he knew she would come. Their battles continued. But something inside those battles began to change. At first, it was only a glance, her eyes lingering on his calm face, even as her spear moved to strike. Then it was a pause in the fight, a breath where their weapons locked and neither pushed forward, listening instead to the sound of the desert wind. Huntress was confused. She had always fought for victory, for the glory of never losing, but with him, the fight felt different. The clashes became conversations. The sparks of steel became words unspoken. One night, beneath the cold stars, their weapons clashed again and again until both of them staggered back. Breathless for the first time, the huntress lowered her spear before the fight was done. "You fight with patience," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You fight with purpose, but not to kill. Why?" The man wiped the sweat from his brow, his blade still glowing faintly under starlight. "Because killing ends the story, but you and I, we are not finished." She frowned, the words settling into her chest like stones. In her world, battles always ended with death. That was the rule. That was the way. Yet here he was, breaking the rule, refusing to let the fight end the old way. In the silence that followed, she asked another question, one she had never thought she would speak. "What do you see when you look at me, human?" He hesitated, then raised his blade slightly, pointing it not in challenge but in respect. "I see a warrior who is more than her victories, a woman chained by her pride, a fire that could burn brighter if only she stopped fearing the dark." The huntress felt her chest tighten. Her people had always seen her as a weapon, an instrument of death. No one had ever spoken of her as something more. No one had dared. The next time they fought, the battle was different. It was still fierce, still sharp, but there were moments when words broke through the storm of steel. "You strike with anger," he said as their weapons locked. "And you block with arrogance," she snapped back. Though a faint smile tugged at her lips, blow after blow, they spoke in the rhythm of battle. Taunts turned to questions, and questions turned to truths. Their weapons were no longer just tools of death. They had become bridges. Her spear chipped. Again, more pieces falling away. The huntress stared at it in disbelief. Her weapon was dying, but instead of fear, she felt something else. Her eyes turned to him, to the human, and for the first time, she realized perhaps this was not the end, but the beginning. He lowered his blade mid-fight, surprising her. His voice was calm but heavy. "Your spear is breaking, Huntress, but maybe that is what you need. Maybe only in breaking can you be remade." His words hit her harder than any strike. She clenched her jaw, torn between fury and curiosity, between pride and something unfamiliar, something she almost feared. The huntress turned away that night without finishing the fight. Her steps were heavy, her mind a storm. She hated how his words pierced her. But she also knew she would return, because every time she left him, the silence of the wasteland felt unbearable, and so the bond between them grew not in peace, not in trust, but in the fire of battle. Every strike was a question, every block an answer. They were enemies, rivals, reflections. Something deeper was being forged, something neither could yet name. As the moons rose high above the desert, the huntress whispered to herself, "I have never lost a battle, but against him, I fear I am losing myself." And somewhere by the river, The human sharpened his blade again, waiting, knowing she would return. The nights grew longer in the wasteland, and with each passing day the huntress found herself drawn back to the human. Her spear was breaking, and though she denied it aloud, she knew the truth in her heart. It was not only the weapon that was cracking, it was her. She wanted to understand him, to know why his blade could stand against her spear when no other weapon had ever done so. She had faced champions, beasts, and even machines built for war, and none had lasted more than a few breaths. Yet this human fought her again and again, never falling, never yielding. One evening, under the glow of the twin moons, she found him sitting on the edge of the old ruins. His blade rested across his knees, gleaming faintly with a light that was not of the fire. It seemed alive, breathing with the rhythm of the stars. The huntress stepped closer, her spear in hand. "That weapon," she said, her voice sharp. "It is no ordinary steel. Tell me what it is." The man lifted his eyes to hers, calm as always. His hand brushed the blade slowly as if it were a living thing. "This sword," he answered, "was not forged for conquest. It was forged for protection. It carries the will of those who came before me." Her brows furrowed, words of myth. She spat. "Blades are made of metal, not will." But deep inside, she knew there was something different. When her spear clashed against his sword, she felt it. A weight, a history, as though countless battles and voices sang within its steel. The human stood, holding the blade before him. "Your spear is strong," he said, "but it drinks only blood. It grows heavier with each kill. Mine is different. It carries memory. It grows lighter the more I fight with purpose." The huntress's grip tightened on her spear. Anger flared in her chest, not because of his words, but because they unsettled her. She had always believed her strength came from victory, from never falling. But now she wondered, had her victories chained her instead of freeing her? They clashed again, sparks bursting as steel met energy. But this time the fight was not just about power. It was about questions, about truths hidden in the rhythm of combat. "You carry pride like armor," he said as he blocked her strike, "and you carry pity like a chain." She snapped, her spear sweeping low. The fight circled the ruins, their shadows twisting under moonlight. Each strike was sharp, each step careful, but their words cut deeper than their weapons. At one point, her spear struck his blade hard, and for a heartbeat the ruins trembled, the ground cracked, dust falling from ancient stones. For the first time she saw the blade glow brighter, a silver fire running along its edge. "What is this power?" she demanded, pulling back, her voice fierce but curious. The human's answer was simple. "It is not power, it is choice. The blade answers to the heart of its wielder. That is why it resists you, Huntress. Your heart is not clear." Her chest tightened, rage and confusion colliding within her. She attacked again, faster, stronger, desperate to silence him. Her spear cut through the air like a storm, but each strike was met. Each thrust turned aside. The crack in her spear deepened. Splintering into two, she froze, staring at it in shock. The weapon that had carried her name, her legend, her pride was dying before her eyes. The human lowered his blade slightly, not in mockery, but in understanding. "Your spear is bound to your victories," he said quietly, "and victories cannot last forever. When the weapon breaks, you will be forced to decide. Are you only the huntress who never lost, or are you something more?" Her hands trembled, though she tried to steady them. Her teeth clenched. She wanted to deny him, to scream. But deep inside, the words struck true. That night, she did not finish the battle. She turned away, clutching her cracked spear as if it were her very soul. Her heart raced, her breath heavy. She hated his calmness, hated how he spoke like he already knew her better than she knew herself. But she also knew she would return, not just for the fight, but for the answers she had never sought before. As she vanished into the desert shadows, the human sat once more on the ruins, his blade glowing faintly in the moonlight. He whispered to himself, though the night carried his words far, "She will learn, one way or another. She will see the truth of herself, and far away. The huntress whispered into the wind, her voice low and uncertain. Truth is not what I seek, yet it follows me with every strike. The bond between them was no longer just battle. It had become something deeper, something neither fully understood, but both knew it would lead to a breaking point that could not be undone. Asterisk, the desert winds howled louder than ever, carrying storms of sand across the broken land. The huntress stood on a cliff, her cracked spear in hand, staring down at the wasteland where she had built her legend. She had been the one no warrior could defeat, the one no blade could touch. Yet now her weapon trembled. Weakened, her pride trembled with it. She remembered the human's words, "When the weapon breaks, you will have to decide who you are." She hated those words, hated how they followed her even when she was alone. But deep inside, she knew the breaking was close. When she returned to the ruins, the human was waiting, as always. He stood with his blade at his side, calm, steady. Unshaken by the storms around him, he did not need to speak, for she already knew this would be the fight that decided everything. The huntress raised her spear, though cracks now glowed faintly along its length. "Tonight," she growled, "there will be no retreat. Either I end you, or you end me." The man nodded, his voice firm. "Then tonight is truth." They clashed with a force that shook the earth. Her spear struck with the fury of a storm. His blade met it with the patience of stone. Sparks rained, sand turned to fire beneath their feet. The ruins shook as if remembering ancient wars. Every strike carried meaning. Every clash was louder than before. The huntress fought with desperation, not only against him but against herself, against the fear that without her victories, she was nothing, against the truth that her weapon no longer held the strength of her pride. "Why do you resist me?" she shouted as her spear cut through the air. "Because I see what you cannot," he answered, pushing back with his glowing blade. "You think strength is in never falling, but true strength is in standing even after the fall." Her chest tightened, her grip faltered. For a heartbeat his blade nearly reached her heart. She twisted away, roaring. Her spear slammed against his weapon again, but this time the sound was different, like glass breaking. A long crack split the spear in two. She froze, staring at the weapon as pieces fell to the ground. For the first time, her hand was empty. For the first time, she stood without the weapon that had made her who she was. The man lowered his blade slightly. His eyes never left hers. "It is broken," he said quietly, "but you are not." Her breath came heavy, her pride crumbling. She fell to her knees, clutching the broken shaft. Her voice shook. "If I am not the huntress who never lost, then what am I?" The human stepped closer, his blade still glowing, but he did not raise it. Instead, he spoke. "You are free. Free to fight not because you must, but because you choose. Free to live not for fear of losing, but for the meaning of what you protect." Her eyes burned with anger and confusion, but also with something else, something she had never felt before. Tears stung the corners of her vision. She had never cried, never allowed weakness. But this was not weakness. It was the weight of a truth she could not deny. The human raised his blade high, and for a moment she thought he would strike. But instead, he lowered it, letting the silver light fade. His voice was calm but heavy. "I will not kill you, huntress. I offer you a choice. Stand with me. Fight beside me, not as prey or rival, but as something greater." The huntress's heart raced. Her pride screamed at her to refuse, to rise and fight again. But her soul whispered something different. The spear was gone, her victory scattered like dust. Yet for the first time she did not feel empty. She felt something else, possibility. She rose slowly, her eyes locked on his. Her voice was low, uncertain but strong. "If I walk this path, there is no going back. My name will be broken. My people will call me defeated." The man met her gaze without flinching. "Then let them call you defeated, for in truth, this is your first victory." The silence after his words was heavier than battle. The stars above seemed to lean closer. The desert wind stilled. The huntress stood, the broken spear falling from her hands. She had a choice, and though pride still pulled her back, something stronger pulled her forward. At last she whispered, "Then let this be my choice." And for the first time, the huntress who had never lost allowed herself to be remade. The broken spear lay on the sand, its glowing cracks fading into darkness. For years, it had been the symbol of her strength, her victories, her pride. Now it was nothing more than shattered wood and splintered crystal. The huntress stood above it, her hands empty, her heart heavy, but she did not fall. The human lowered his blade, his voice calm as always. "You are not bound to the weapon, Huntress. You are more than the battles you have won." The words struck her again, but this time they did not wound. This time they opened something inside her. For the first time in her life, she stood without her weapon and did not feel weak. She felt free. She looked at him, the man who had faced her again and again without fear, the one who had never tried to break her body, only her chains. Her voice was low, almost uncertain. "You broke what no one could, yet you did not take my life. Why?" The human sheathed his blade, the silver light dimming. His eyes held no triumph, only truth. "Because victory over you was never my purpose. Huntress, my fight was to reach you, to show you that strength is not only in never losing, but in choosing what you stand for." Her chest tightened, not with rage, but with something she did not know how to name. She had spent her life being a weapon, a legend of fear. Now this stranger from another world offered her something else: choice. The wasteland around them was silent. Even the desert wind seemed to bow to this moment. The huntress slowly bent down, picked up the broken halves of her spear, and let them slip through her fingers. The fragments fell to the sand with a soft sound. Her past was gone. She turned back to the human, her glowing eyes fierce but steady. "If I walk with you, human, I walk as something new. The huntress who never lost will no longer exist." He stepped closer, his voice firm. "Then let her die, and let something greater take her place." The moon shone above them as the desert seemed to hold its breath. For a long time she said nothing, but at last her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Very well. Let the unbeaten huntress die. Let me rise again." From that night forward, she was no longer a weapon of endless victories. She was no longer bound by the fear of defeat. She walked beside the human, her steps steady, her spirit unchained. Together they traveled the wastelands, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as something far stronger. Word of their alliance spread quickly. Villages whispered of the warrior who had been undefeated, now fighting beside the stranger with the silver blade. Some called it betrayal, others called it rebirth, and in time, even her people began to see. For where she once brought only fear, now she brought protection. Where she once hunted without mercy, now she fought for meaning. She was no longer just the huntress, she was a shield, a leader, a fire that burned not to consume, but to light the path. But in quiet moments, when the battles ended and the firelight flickered, she would sometimes look at the human and ask softly, "Did I truly lose to you?" And each time, his answer was the same, his voice steady and sure. "No, Huntress, you did not lose. You were reborn." The stars above seemed brighter after that, as if the heavens themselves had been waiting for this truth. And as they stood side by side, the wastelands no longer felt like a graveyard of bones and broken wars. They felt like the beginning of something greater. For the huntress, who had once been feared as the warrior who never lost, had finally discovered the one truth her victories had always hidden. Sometimes the greatest strength is not in defeating others, but in choosing to rise after breaking. And so the legend lived on, not as the story of the undefeated, but as the tale of the huntress reborn.